The 17 News at Sunrise podcast is brought to you by Clinica Sierra Vista.
Welcome back to the 17 News at Sunrise podcast, where we share your news on your schedule.
Working in the spirit of the Golden Empire, this is 17 News at Sunrise.
And good morning here at 5 a.m. I'm Maddie Jansen alongside Chris Burton, who's in today again for Alex.
The California Highway Patrol this morning is investigating a deadly crash on eastbound 178 at Elizabeth Norris Road. Officers were called to the scene at around 3:40 a.m., describing a vehicle on its roof down an embankment. Now, we're still learning more about this crash. We will continue to update you as we learn more, but no further information is available at this time.
Making news around the world, a third round of talks scheduled today between Ukraine and Russia. They come after a weekend that saw two ceasefires fail when Russia continued shelling cities.
Meanwhile, Secretary of State Antony Blinken says the U.S. is in active talks to end the import of oil from Russia. NBC's Bree Jackson is live on Capitol Hill with details.
Good morning, Chris, Maddie. Russian officials claim there will be a ceasefire in several Ukrainian cities this morning, carving a path for residents to flee. This after two previous failed attempts. The Ukrainian government says Russian forces violated a ceasefire agreement over the weekend as attacks by Russian forces escalate.
They again, for the second time, refused to allow women and children to get out.
World leaders are considering new ways to fight back against Russia, including possible investigations into the country's actions.
Any attack on civilians is a war crime.
The U.S. is also in talks with Poland about a deal to send Russian-made fighter jets to Ukraine.
We're talking very actively about this, looking at what we could do to backfill Poland if it chooses to send the MiGs and the Su planes that it has to Ukraine.
Political pressure is growing for President Biden to impose a no-fly zone.
I would take nothing off the table, but I would be very clear that we're going to support the Ukrainian people, the Ukrainian president.
There are also bipartisan calls for a ban on Russian oil.
I think we have enough of it. We should produce more American oil and buy less Russian oil, or none at all.
The national average for gas has soared past the $4 mark. The Biden administration cautions prices could rise even more. Still, some Americans support tougher sanctions against Russia.
Or send the message, send all the messages. But I think we have oil here. We don't need to be buying their oil.
U.S. companies continue to pull goods and services from Russia, with Netflix and TikTok added to the growing list. In Ukraine, more than 1.5 million people have fled to safety. Residents not yet impacted by the violence remain wary.
I fear for my kids.
U.S. officials warned the war could go on for a while. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says lawmakers are considering a bill that includes a ban on Russian oil and billions of dollars to help refugees from Ukraine. In Washington, I'm Bree Jackson for 17 News.
And Ukraine's vice prime minister has shot down Russia's proposal for opening humanitarian corridors in the country. This all comes in response to Russia's news that they will begin a ceasefire today and would open corridors leading to Russia and Belarus. The vice prime minister saying that Ukrainians will not go to Belarus and Russia. She called this move an unacceptable variant of the humanitarian corridors opening, saying that the Russians are trying to manipulate French President Emmanuel Macron's honest intention to provide the people of Ukraine a path to safety. Instead, she said Ukraine has sent its, quote, own vision of humanitarian corridors to Russia in response.
Meanwhile, CityServe, the national nonprofit founded here in Bakersfield, assembled a team of volunteers to fly to Warsaw, Poland this weekend to bring food to Ukrainian refugees. CityServe collaborates with governmental and non-government agencies as well as local churches to deliver food and durable goods to struggling families in underserved communities here in Kern County and across the country. They have chartered a commercial airliner to transport volunteers who will deliver 1 million meals to Ukrainian refugees fleeing the war in their homeland. And stay tuned because Pastor Wendell Vinson will be providing us with updates from the Poland-Ukraine border as their mission of mercy unfolds this week.
In his strongest statement yet on the conflict, Secretary of State Antony Blinken said the U.S. is documenting reports which appear to show that Russia is committing war crimes in Ukraine. This invasion has touched every corner of the world, including right here in Bakersfield, where a local couple is on pins and needles as they monitor their Ukrainian foster son, now grown, hunkered down in a city under siege. Now, 17's Robert Price has the story.
The people of Kharkiv, Ukraine, hoped it was all bluster and some kind of international machismo, and that sanity and sense would win out, right up until the Russian tanks moved on the city of 2 million. One of those Ukrainians hoping for the best was a 28-year-old man named Sergei, who just happens to be well acquainted with Bakersfield City Councilman Bruce Freeman and his wife Monica. So well acquainted, in fact, he calls them mom and dad. Until the last few years, Sergei, an orphan, had been visiting Bakersfield on extended stays once or twice a year since he was 9. Freeman remembers Sergei's first visit with another orphan.
We took these boys to the beach. They'd never seen an ocean.
Freeman's took in a dozen foreign kids over the years, most of them exchange students, but Sergei became theirs in all but the legal sense. And now Sergei is literally in the middle of a war. He's hunkered down, hiding, but staying in contact with Bruce with photos, videos, and running dialogue.
The pleas of someone trapped in a bunker with Russian tanks up above him, he's taking those pictures, sending us to it, dodging the tanks. And I said, get out of there. Yeah. You don't have a gun.
Freeman, who represents the city's 5th Ward, asked us not to use Sergei's last name, his photo as an adult, or certain other details because he fears that the Russian invaders might find him.
He says, I'm trapped. They've blown up the bridges on both sides. The Army's in charge of the other one. When he goes up, that's where the tanks are idling, ready to drive in. Right where he's in whatever town he's in, he's dodging around. They're all idling, ready to start moving in.
And Sergei, at 28, is, after all, technically a soldier. He's been conscripted, as have all men of fighting age. A week ago, Sergei was texting Freeman from his home in Kharkiv. He was concerned about the Russian military buildup, but still hopeful. He's newly engaged to be married, and he just received a promotion as a logistics expert for a trucking company. He couldn't have grown up with a better business mentor than Freeman, the former Castle and Cook chief executive who'd financed his university education, part of it at Cal State Bakersfield. And the councilman and his wife couldn't have been more proud.
Maybe this makes us appreciate the freedoms we have, and it's really nice having that big ocean in between us and Europe, isn't it? Unfortunately, it probably makes us less aware of what's happening and less likely to, get upset and act.
The Freemans have 4 other grown kids, and they've been through all the typical ordeals of parenthood. But this is a new one with a whole nother level of helplessness. In Bakersfield, Robert Price, 17 News.
Your time now is 5:09. Community members gathered at the home in California City where 3-year-old Orson and 4-year-old Orrin West's adoptive parents reported them missing. And there was a vigil held there Friday evening. The brothers went missing in December of 2020, or were reported missing, rather. The district attorney's office confirmed their deaths last week, charging their adoptive parents with murder. Neither of the missing boys' bodies have been found.
We still asking the question, where are the boys? That ain't changed, we need their bodies, they need a proper burial, a proper closure for the family. It ain't gonna never be a closure because they're not here. Thank you for the awareness.
If you know anything about what happened to Orrin and Orson West, you are encouraged to call the Kern Secret Witness line at 322-4040.
Meantime, Jacqueline and Trezell West entered not guilty pleas in court last week to the 5 criminal charges filed against them for the disappearance and presumed death of their 2 adoptive sons. Prosecutor Eric Smith asked that all reports be sealed and a gag order issued barring attorneys, investigators, and witnesses from publicly commenting on the evidence. A motion on that gag order is set for tomorrow morning. The judge ordered both be held without bail and scheduled the trial for May 23rd. If convicted, the Wests face 30 years to life on the murder charges. Law enforcement has not yet found the bodies of either of the missing boys.
Accused killer Matthew Queen in the Bakersfield 3 case is due back in court this morning. Queen, age 45, and ex-girlfriend Bailey Despot allegedly tortured and killed Micah Holsenbake in 2018. Prosecutors say Queen and Holsenbake assembled and sold illegal AR-15 style rifles. Despot's also charged with torture and murder. She's been missing since 2018. Another co-defendant, Matthew Tyler Van de Castile, took a plea deal last year and agreed to testify at Queen's trial. Prosecutors allege the torture and killing took place in Van de Castell's garage. Holzenbeek and Despot, along with James Kolstad, became known as the Bakersfield Three, acquaintances who were killed or went missing within 2 months of each other in spring of 2018. Now to your 17 News follow-up file. It has been a year since 16-year-old Maria Neufeld's body was found in an orchard northeast of Arvin. After all this time, no one has been arrested in her murder. Sheriff's deputies were called to the area of Tower Line and Buena Vista Roads on March 6th of last year. When they arrived, they found Neufeld's body with a gunshot wound to the head. The last time the family had seen her was 2 days earlier when she left her sister's birthday party to hang out with a friend, but never came home. After the family filed a missing persons report, the sheriff's office identified her with a DNA swab and determined she was in East Bakersfield in Arvin just before her death. Neufeld leaves behind a 2-year-old daughter. If you know anything about what happened, you can call KCSO at 861-3110, or you can remain anonymous by calling the secret witness line at 322-4040.
Now to your 17 homicide tracker. Police say 2 people were arrested after a deadly shooting Friday night in Ridgecrest. Ridgecrest police officers were called to South Porter Street near West Franklin Avenue at about 9 p.m. for a report of a shooting. When they arrived, they found one person suffering from gunshot wounds in the road. That person was pronounced dead at the scene. Officers say a car sped away from the scene, leading police on a chase. The driver and another person at the scene were arrested. First responders identify the 2 men arrested as 32-year-old Brian Koykendall and 28-year-old Edwin Moore. They were booked into the Kern County Jail on suspicion of murder, held without bail, and due in court tomorrow. If you know anything about this shooting, you're encouraged to call Ridgecrest Police. That number to call is 760-499-5100.
5:32 is your time now. At least one person was killed in a crash this morning. California Highway Patrol officers say they were called to the scene just after 3 a.m. for a report of a woman riding a bicycle when she was hit by a vehicle on White Lane at Union Avenue. According to CHP, that vehicle then left the scene in an unknown direction. Again, this happened at White Lane in Union around 3 a.m. If you have any information, you can call CHP. And now to a signature issue here at TV 17, pedestrian safety. The California Highway Patrol says at least one pedestrian was killed in a crash south of Bakersfield early yesterday morning. Officers were called to Highway 166 at the off-ramp from the I-5 northbound around 2:30 a.m. When they arrived, they found that person lying in the road after being hit by a Kia Optima. The pedestrian was pronounced dead at the scene. It's unclear whether alcohol, drugs, or speeding were factors.
And a man is dead after a crash yesterday in California City. California Highway Patrol officers were called to Highway 14 south of California City Boulevard at about 2:15 a.m. yesterday. When they arrived, they found 46-year-old Marquise Adrian Evans, who was driving when his car slammed into another vehicle. Evans was pronounced dead at the scene. Again, it's unclear what led up to this crash as well, or whether alcohol, drugs, or speeding factored in. We will update this story as we learn more. And one person was injured after a crash last night on Highway 99. California Highway Patrol officers were called at around 8:40 p.m. to the 99 near White Lane for a report of an accident. When they arrived, they found this car you can see here in the road flipped over after the accident. Emergency crews say they rushed one person to a local hospital with major injuries. It's unclear what led up to this crash, and the investigation is still ongoing. And with the recent rainfall, it is a good reminder that both the city of Bakersfield and Cal Water are restricting water use in our area. Now, if you get your water from California Water Service, outdoor watering is limited to 2 days a week between the hours of 6 p.m. and 8 a.m. If you get that water from the city of Bakersfield, watering is limited to 3 days a week between 6 p.m. and 9 a.m. Both water purveyors prohibit outdoor watering during and at least 48 hours after measurable rainfall like we saw last weekend. If you wash your car with a hose, it must have a shutoff nozzle, and we are all prohibited from washing down driveways or sidewalks with a garden hose. Again, all this information is available on our website, kget.com, so just head there for the latest restrictions.
Kern County long has led the way when it comes to oil production in California, but it also produces the most renewable energy in the Golden State. Recently, there is a law that supervisors say disproportionately hurts the Golden Empire when it comes to renewables. 17's Maddie Gannon has more.
A loss of over $19 million a year is what we're experiencing in Kern County because of that solar property tax exclusion.
California's solar tax exclusion law stipulates the property tax can't increase for land where solar projects are built. It's another push by the state to address climate change, weaning it off fossil fuels and toward renewables.
The reason why this is so important is because the governor of the state of California, Gavin Newsom, is working very hard to destroy our oil industry, which is our largest taxpayer. But the problem with that solar tax exclusion is we're not receiving the revenue that he believes would compensate for the loss of the oil industry.
Scrivener says most of the county's cash comes from property taxes, which funds essential services like sheriff, fire, animal, and road maintenance. We asked Newsom about the law on his recent trip to Kern.
I am mindful of the property tax question, to your question, and that is something that is not only on our radar, it's something that is being discussed and debated in Sacramento.
Chair of environmental group Kern Chapter Stephen Montgomery says he gets where the county is coming from, but the law is meant to incentivize energy companies to undertake large-scale solar projects.
If there was no tax exclusion act in place, a lot of these facilities would have never been built, and the county would not be receiving the taxes anyway because they simply wouldn't be there to tax.
That was 17's Maddie Gannon reporting. Newsom pointed out that the state gave money to Bakersfield's B3K initiative to help the county financially transition away from oil. Meanwhile, Scrivener said until the solar law is rescinded, the county will require all future solar projects to pay a cumulative impact charge. Your time now is 5:37, and making news around the state. Last week, State Senator Shannon Grove announced a bill designed to hit the brakes on human trafficking. The bill, called SB 1042, would include human trafficking within the definition of a violent felony and serious felony, therefore making it a strike under California's three-strike law. Grove introduced it February 15th, arguing that state laws aren't tough enough on this particular crime. The modern-day form of slavery is estimated to be a $150 billion a year global industry. And there's help available for victims of human trafficking. You can call the National Human Trafficking Hotline at 1-888-373-7888, or locally, the Child Protective Services Hotline at 631-6011. You can also visit the Department of Human Services website, kcdhs.org.
Your time now 5:38. A new poll shows California voters are open to the idea of creating a legal market for betting on college and professional sports. The poll, conducted by UC Berkeley's Institute of Governmental Studies, co-sponsored by the Los Angeles Times, found 45% of voters surveyed would support amending the California Constitution to allow sports gambling. 1/3 of voters said they are opposed to such an effort, while the remaining 22% of respondents remain undecided. As many as 3 ballot measures on the topic could appear on the statewide ballot in November. A recent 17 News survey found 44% of respondents from Kern County support legalizing sports betting. 56% are opposed to it.
Working in the spirit of the Golden Empire, this is 17 News at Sunrise.
The 17 News at Sunrise podcast is a production of KGET and Nexstar Media Group. For more on all of the headlines in today's show, head to kget.com.